Here, I'm the host of the More We Know podcast for the Gen Zs and Millennials. I know I say that. I say it's for the Gen Zs and Millennials. And yeah, although that is the focus, this podcast is really for anyone. But I look back at my time in college and I wish I had something like this. I wish I had a podcast where I could learn from mentors or experts in their industries or, fellow Gen Zs that are talking about real world topics, that are talking about what is a credit card APR, what is investing, what does all this mean?
Welcome to the More We Know podcast with your host and social media influencer, Mir. Gen Zs and Millennials.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the More We Know podcast, your go-to platform for Gen Zs and Millennials, where we have thousands and thousands of Gen Zs tune in monthly to hear from experts all around the world, like the founder of Reebok, like the mayor of Miami, and many more. Today, we have a very, very special guest by the name of Carmen Rossi. If you're watching this podcast from Chicago, you might be very familiar with Carmen and his journey. You might be very familiar with his places. You might have been at Joy District or Hubbard Inn or many of the multitude of places that he has. Carmen Rossi was born here in Frankfort, Illinois. He received 4 collegiate and post-collegiate degrees while owning and operating 5 profitable companies. The keyword profitable. It's hard to become profitable as a business as is. And he was doing these degrees as he was running these companies. His background, there is a massive background here for him on his 8 hospitality management company that employs over 1,000 people, but I'm going to give it to him to introduce himself more formally to us. Carmen, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And depending on when you're seeing this, probably post-production, but happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving. But no, looking forward to our time together here.
So Carmen, walk us through your journey here. The More We Know podcast is a mentorship podcast. We can look at your journey now and say, wow, you've had a very successful career. But I know it wasn't always like that. Growing up in Frankfort, can you talk about maybe what your parents did for a living and this entrepreneurial path?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, by the way, I love the platform, and that is the engagement and the opportunity, not limited only to millennials and Gen Zs, but definitely with a focus. And I think we'll have some fun today, sort of identifying the differences of culture, the differences of between generations, but also it's a living and breathing journey for us right now, because we're still, I might be on the tail end or a little bit further on the spectrum from a millennial to a Gen Z. However, we're all still striving to improve, develop additional skills, strengthen our assets. And I think for this platform and this time that we get to spend, I want to talk about life themes. I don't think not to necessarily parallel a specific podcast in particular, but I always enjoy these opportunities to engage so that I can share a part of my attitude and how time committed one has to be on a 24/7 basis in establishing your personal brand and letting that personal brand. And when I say that, I mean, as individuals, we're all representing our own brand. I teach undergraduates at the University of Illinois, and I'm always talking about that, maybe anecdotally or maybe as some life advice. But when you show up to class in pajamas, that's your brand. If you show up, that's a representation of your brand more appropriately. And if you show up, in athletic wear as required because you're a student athlete, if you show up in a shirt and tie, if you're whatever you're constantly sort of representing your brand. And I'm more and more conscious of that. And I think, as we establish the differing industries. So what is it that I'm involved in? I appreciate the kind words. Yes, our hospitality company. If we look into that, I'm probably one of the only companies in Chicago that has, certainly in the hospitality bucket, but we've got very diverse genres and concepts. So if I were to, if there's 20 concepts that I'm a part of, I look at it into thirds. So about a third is your traditional plated service dining restaurant. A second, third might be more described like neighborhood bars. So we've all been to the proverbial sports bar or the neighborhood bar. And then the third bucket is nightclubs. And I'm actually the largest nightclub owner in the city. And, you know, it's what's more typical for hospitality companies and entrepreneurs in this field is that they stick to a path. We're really good at this specific concept. In our restaurants, I mean, the diversity of food is American flair, French, seafood, Italian. We've got Mexican taqueria. We certainly do pizza. Within our pizza, we do all sorts of different styles: Detroit style, New York slice, and that philosophy. If we were to just target it on hospitality, there is a method, obviously, and I sort of go into neighborhoods and concepts and do a lot of research as to how can I best assimilate to the demographic that's already there and furthering their enjoyment of the street or the neighborhood or the area. And also, how can I, you know, on the task of the value add. Maybe this is something that this area, this genre, this concept would add to the overall community ambiance. So we'll put a pin on hospitality, and I am involved in. I started a real estate company. Most of the venues that we operate, our ideal position is to own the underlying real estate, so as to minimize the battle with the landlord. Not that I don't battle with myself, based on the tenant and landlord hat that I'll wear. But if we can, you know, if we can secure the asset, some of the reasons I look into that is I'm in it for the long haul. This hospitality industry is very stressful, right? What is the average lifespan of a typical restaurant bar? And you could cut that in half and say the average lifespan of a nightclub. And that may change from whether you're in a major metropolitan like New York, Miami, LA, Chicago, but it still holds true whether you're urban lifestyle, suburban, whether you're major metropolitan. Those lifespans and those margins are thin, but I put a massive stake into the community, which is to say, I want to be there for the long haul. I want to be a part of the community process. I want to be an asset, or as I said, a value add. You know, on that community focus, it's one of the ways I've really fallen in love with Chicago, and I've said this before, but it just has always held true that this is a great city. It's a great city of opportunity. You know, query as to whether if I would have been raised in another suburb of a major metropolitan, if I would have had those same opportunities. And I think, you know, that is contributory of just luck and timing and being maybe at the right place at the right time. But I have heavily involved myself and strongly encourage everyone to involve themselves in the community process. And by that, and that's sort of a third bucket as we transition from hospitality, real estate. I mentioned community. I think getting involved in the community is being a member of a student organization in undergrad or postgraduate. It can be a neighborhood organization that meets once a month and talks about the various related issues and surroundings. It can be, there's political organizations, religious organizations. The idea that, you know, while these may look and feel different, these are organizations that are intended to benefit the community, participate in the goings on, and network. You know, you're going to meet so many different people who represent different industries and interests. And perhaps what you don't know now is that they or you could play a role together in solving for a circumstance, matter, or issue. So yeah, I've always been like that. High school, college. I always wanted to get involved in whoever would have me, I suppose. But And I've stayed pretty participatory in the politics. I was appointed by the governor in 2015, reappointed in 2018. I've been appointed by the mayor of Chicago. I am a member of a number of varying boards, foundations, and organizations. I'm on the board of the Restaurant Association, which is statewide, the Chicago Chamber of Commerce, and really, what it does, it's building. Again, I'm seeing the value of participating in my community, right? Because I want to have a positive business, and I think you could do this on a micro level, right? I think if we were actively listening, we could all imagine a parallel between, a macro involvement and taking a entrepreneurial attitude, which is thrusting your company into the fabric of the community. But I think it's on a micro level, right? I think it's just having neighbors in a residential block and engaging and identifying the issues, participating just to better the assets of yours and those around you. So I am proud of that. I am every day I'm doing something in that field of civic involvement, civic participation. And with that, yeah, I mean, my next sort of transition, I guess, is I did go to law school. I do very much value the concepts of education and personal growth. I can, since I teach at the University of Illinois, I will be careful not to indict the modern education program as a whole, but would add that, you're going to get way more out of anything if you are paying attention, if you can block your phone, text messages, Instagram, and Snap for 50 minutes in class, if you set goals that are not easily reached. To me, it's not about being an A student. It's about achieving at a pushing yourself to achieve at a degree that might be a little bit further outside of what is comfortable or normal. And that can be a C student trying to get a B. That requires participation, effort, dedication, commitment, goals. And I don't think any of those tenets in isolation are liabilities. So I did go to law school, and I graduated, actually practiced law.
And how old were you at this point, by the way? Can you tell the audience?
Geez, so I went to school. No, I will not answer an age question, but I will say, and that's my own flaw, but tongue in cheek. I went to school for 10 years straight. And so when I was in undergrad, I went to the University of Illinois, again in Champaign, and it's a big school, any Big Ten school. A 4,000 person school, 4,000 person anything is pretty big. But the Big Ten is known for campuses that are ranging between 35, 40 on the low end to 50, 60, especially if you consider graduate. So, I wanted to stay active. I didn't want to get lost in the shuffle. I will say, just maybe more than an anecdote, I can always remember wanting to succeed in school. And now I will footnote that and asterisk the definition of success. It's never a 4.0. I was never going to do what it takes to be a 4.0, and I was never intelligent enough to not have to study and get a 4.0. But by success, I mean going to class, never missing an assignment, studying for tests. If I didn't understand something, asking the professor. Those themes and those practices have stayed with me and made such a world of difference. And again, I think we could take those isolated micro concepts and insert them into any other situation, whether it's a personal relationship, friendship, marriage, family, or company organizational structure. So I started these small little companies, and My first was as a freshman in college, and it was innovative furnishings. What we set out to do was build loft style furniture for dormitories that were built prior to the mid 70s. And I'm only going to do this in 10 seconds, but in old school dorms, you would have these air conditioning and heating units that came jettisoned out. So you can imagine if you went to IKEA, they didn't have, their furniture is very linear, and there's no carve outs to contemplate for anything other than a square rectangle room. So we designed furniture that then shaped around these external structures that protruded into your room. And it was cool. I mean, you're talking about, what is that? That's starting a business. That is engineering. I'd never started a business before. I, to this day, have never been in an engineering class. I've never participated in construction or hung a photo with a nail and a hammer. So that is sales. You're selling your product to the university. There, you're becoming an approved vendor. You are then creating marketing and advertising materials to then disseminate to your consumer base, which is students living in dorms built for a certain time. And it was mostly me and one other buddy, and then we hired our friends during the summer, and we, rented a warehouse and started building these things, but we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And that was okay, so long as, you stuck to the principles of, we're going to work every day, we're going to identify what our goals are, we're going to be diligent in doing them. And again, you begin to see a sort of pattern of, I like to talk about reverse engineering your goals. So, if this is where I want to be, I can close my eyes, imagine everything I had to do to get there. But when you don't know where you want to be, right, which is so much the life of an entrepreneur and somebody who's starting up a business, when you maybe don't know where this is going, well, then it becomes difficult to reverse engineer by its very definition. So in that situation, we are, we just need to apply, very common, practical, sensible goals and steps. And not, I will say, maybe you take it day by day. Maybe you don't have a 3-year plan. Maybe a 3-year plan is inappropriate because you don't know where you're going necessarily. But if I can isolate that into some micro goals to keep me focused and push myself to set those goals maybe a little bit above what I think makes me comfortable and things I know I can do, that's going to drive me to grow and develop new skills. So over the course of college, I did probably 6 or 7 of those companies. And that might sound like a lot, but again, I was in school for 10 years. And none of the companies that we started did I have any experience or knowledge or grew up doing or had a family member, which probably isn't like a great business model. I think preparation and skill discipline is at least a little important, but I guess considering our audience, the point that I'm making is, hey, this is sometimes the journey is the prize. If maybe sometimes profit isn't the only solution. And I think, I don't have any of the money I made then now. It's all gone, of course. But that was, for me, it was more about maximizing, participating in the community, maximizing my time, and learning all these new skills that I had never really experienced before. And we didn't really have any help. We didn't have, I've never participated in a mentor-mentee program. I've never, my parents are not entrepreneurs. And so, I at the conclusion of 10 years, and I think I had enough at that point. I mean, I could have kept going, but enough degrees. I decided to practice law, and I practiced for. I I had an office in a law firm. The office did not, I take it back. It did have a window, but it was a window that looked directly into, I mean, I don't know if there was 6 inches into another brick building. So, I mean, there was no natural light by any means. And, with laptops and the internet, you're not in the library necessarily. You're kind of just working during the time to get your jobs done. So I said, I had what money I had, and I was in my 20s, and I wanted to open up a restaurant. And I really wanted to do it downtown. I was from a small suburb south of Chicago. Big major, I mean, for anybody who can remember the first time, if you didn't grow up in a city, I think we can all remember the first time we drove or flew into New York or Chicago or Detroit or Cincinnati. And you see those big buildings, and you see how fast traffic moves, and so many people are dressed in business attire. In our small town, that wasn't necessarily what you would see every day on the streets. So, that kind of became intoxicating, and I wanted to go for it. And I'll tell you what allowed me to do it. There was enough confidence by having tried it on a smaller scale. Started a business. Wait a minute. Yes, I don't know anything about hospitality. I did work in the campus bars while I was in school, but those are grain alcohol at best, and no food. And I mean, we've all been to a college bar. We know what it is. So, but I did know sales, and I did know marketing and advertising, and I kind of, and I've built something from scratch, and I've taught myself new skills, and I've networked with people that have maybe done construction before, because we had to do that. And I've networked with people who may have done marketing and advertising. So I wasn't intimidated by that. I kind of just, I shouldn't say I assumed, but I did expect that my chances of success might be not great. And because I wanted to do it at a very competitive level, downtown Chicago, big space, food, beverage, the whole 9 yards, big lease, big deal. And my thought was, so on the one hand, we'll go back to my confidence in having done a startup, even on a small scale. The second is important. And I think it's important for particularly this audience to be conscious of the opportunity of youth, which is to say, I wasn't married. I didn't have 3 kids, 1 in college. I didn't have, I did have some student debt. And I had the money that I made in these different companies over the course of my undergrad and graduate years. But I knew that if I lost everything, in my 20s, I was 27, my parents would still love me. I actually lived with my parents when I graduated and opened up my first place in Chicago. I still live with my parents. For anybody who's like, man, I got to move out. Hey, if your roommates are cool and they make you breakfast, that's good to gig. I was in no rush necessarily to leave. So, but I mean, that's kind of a little embarrassing, probably above the mean average age of people who still lived with their parents. But I figured it'd be fine if I lost everything. I still had those skill sets. I still had that network, that friendship base. I still had a family to go back to, degrees to fall on, which is to say, not necessarily a specific discipline like doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, but the degree of, wait a minute, I got through college, I got good grades. And really, I mean, that served as a huge safety net for probably the stresses that I didn't allow to become overwhelming. But we opened up, and it was a success. In the first 7-8 months was tough while we were figuring it out, literally figuring it out. Designing the menus, changing the cocktails based on the season, understanding the art of event booking and corporate strategy parties, and table service, the steps of service, approaching a table, hiring managers. So we did all of that. We did it from, and I think we were busy enough to hide how green we were, and how, for me, it was, let's just have great ambiance. Let's just be super nice and committed to, every day, let's make sure we're introducing ourselves to a new business in the community, going to a community meeting with the local alderman, trying to get on the mayor's radar, everything that we can do, hosting events, everything we can do to further. And that's what we did. That was within our control of knowledge and commitment. So yeah, that took off, and then really I just kept going with it. So what I had started over that time was a law firm, because of that network of people and that expanse of network into the corporate community and the various local regulatory departments within City Hall, but certainly the local leadership with the varying, whether it's an alderman, a community leader, religious leader, those organizations obviously all participate as well into the political landscape and processes. So I still have my firm today. Most of the people, we do have a couple of transactional attorneys who work for my firm, but most of the people are lobbyists that they sort of, we're definitely government processes oriented, representing certainly restaurants, bars, nightclubs, live music venues, but also developers, commercial, residential, industrial. And in doing that, I learned a lot about government process. How do you file for a business license, get a permit to build, the codes inspections, how do you change zoning? And now at this point, I'm assuming I lost at least a portion of the crowd, because this sounds procedurally a little boring. And you're not wrong necessarily, but the point that I would flag is that by involving yourself into all those mundane processes is an understanding, not the School of Rock, how a bill becomes a law, and that jam that I hope everyone has heard of once, the cartoon. But more or less the same commitment of, okay, I'm going to go to class, I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to put my phone away, I'm going to study, I'm going to learn, I'm going to take the time. If I have any questions, I'm going to go to the professor. Those are the same themes of understanding, okay, I have this business, I might as well learn all the steps, and now we're actually good at it, we know it, and we can apply it into another business, which is the law firm, which grows, thankfully, every month. Every month we're adding more and more clients. So, and we involve ourselves in, major music festivals, some of the biggest in the country. And there's definitely, I'm not going to lie, it's really cool to represent some of the biggest companies in the country. And I don't want to necessarily be too specific because they're ongoing relationships, but that aspect of it is something I never intended to do, right? I just intended to understand how my own business operated, how my own path and process could better contribute to the overall picture. In doing so, you don't realize the skills and the assets that you yourself are building. And that moment when you say, wait a minute, this is actually another business, and I could do this for others. And then you start representing huge companies. That's really cool. And we've passed legislation at the city and state level that has had massive impacts, positive community benefit. And, in doing that processes, I'll go into yet another bucket of something that I knew nothing about, but I have a company with. So throughout many states in the union, you've seen legislation for cannabis. And state rules, it's all governed by state rules. And because it's federally illegal or not legal federally, there are interstate commerce, which says, hey, you can't grow in Michigan and sell in Illinois because that crosses state line, and that is illegal because it's not federally legal. Yes, that's boring, but that's why you can't necessarily buy in Colorado and drive through other states, because now you're transferring. Just a little tid. Now, each state has its own rules, and those rules are, you would think, mostly the same. Like, well, what is it? I mean, cannabis is cannabis. You're buying it, you're smoking it, or eating it, or ingesting it, however. You got zoning, you have business classifications, you've got the application, the makeup of the application, and the equity makeup, whether it's social equity, veteran, women. And it started touching on a lot of the things that I've learned along the way by involving myself in other businesses. And these checklists, in order to win in Illinois, you essentially needed a perfect score. There were so many applicants and so few number of licenses. You couldn't afford to miss a point. So, like you would any course syllabus or preparation for a test, you would just go through every chapter and realize, I got to check every box. If there's something I don't know, I better figure it out, because I anticipate we need to have a perfect score. And we did, and we've won a number of licenses. I actually participated on building one dispensary already that has been sold to a publicly traded company. And then I have my own licenses that I'm looking to develop. Now, what's interesting about that? Don't know anything about cannabis. I knew as much about cannabis today as I did hospitality when I graduated. At least with hospitality, I eat food and drink alcohol. I'll be honest with you, don't really like weed. I've tried smoking it, I've tried eating it, I've tried, whatever. And it's just not my jam. But I understand it. I understand that, wait a minute, this isn't necessarily about the product necessarily. This is about your ability to advertise, market, your ability to understand the processes, regulatory, how can I achieve the license. This is about sales, hiring a team, building out a space, going to the network, and figuring out how I can be a valuable asset to the community, which, as we know with cannabis, some communities are very hot topic. So that's educating, and that's a lot of credibility. If I was known on Google, whatever that means, as a bad faith operator, and there were articles that were lambasting on this and that, anybody who Googles can say, I don't know if we want this business owner in our community, And so that's where we have to be super conscious of our brand, right? Because I would love to wear pajamas every day. I just know maybe it's communicating a different message, and maybe it's not consistent with the brand that I think is necessary to be able to launch new businesses. So this is all just going on now. The things that I'm sort of interested in with now are everything I just said. I'm looking to continue to grow. I've been involved in a number of startups. I find myself now doing more joint ventures and education apps that focus on strengthening or establishing internship opportunities for high school students and college students. And there's, we're somewhat developing our own tech that can contribute to our own products, and trying to sort of envision how we can go not only horizontal but vertical with our processes. So it's definitely an ongoing journey. I'm a big fan of ragging on millennials and Gen Z especially. But that's but it's all in jest, and it's definitely with a significant degree of endearment. But we are competitive, and I think we are definitely different than I reserve the right to be wrong, but I believe the generation above me is Gen X. And then there's, I think, another generation, and I think it's baby boom. I don't know the hierarchy of it all, but I can definitely say, boy, millennials and Gen Zs do have a little bit different of a path. And that's worth noting. I mean, I mentioned it earlier. I don't want to take this opportunity to spend time indicting what I believe to be issues with the American education system. But what we can say is that today, it's not necessary. It's statistically not uncommon to have a college degree, whereas that might not have been as prevalent for older generations today. And I think that you're seeing a little bit of a correction now on the younger side of Gen Zs are exploring opportunities that don't necessitate the traditional collegiate path. But with that, you need to build a resume for any meeting or purpose. I look at an 8.5 by 11. I say, okay, I'm presenting to a community. I'm pitching an idea. Whether it's to my own team or to an investor, but I got to keep it within 8.5 by 11, which is to say, I can't have a 5-page resume. So I got to hit the highlights. I have to be efficient. And sometimes, and perhaps even more often for me, it might be the reverse side is hard to fill a page because I don't have the credibility. How can I establish that you should entrust financial capital and resources in my cannabis company when I can't much talk about cannabis specifically, meaning I'm not as educated with it. But we still need to build the proverbial resume. And I think we do that by better cataloging our life experiences. So you've heard me say this a few times. These are very similar processes that I have applied throughout the expanse of the journey. And I don't think any of them were too theory-based or too overwhelming to understand necessarily. I think I keep it simple for myself. But we can't overlook the things that we've done. We just need to better frame the story, right? So often I meet with millennials and Gen Zs, and they might be in a job that they just are not inspired by. And it's not always about wanting to be a mogul. It's about wanting to have purpose. People who love what they do wear themselves down doing it. Now, if you look at that, nobody loves being worn down. Nobody's like, man, I wish every day I was worn down, right? But there are so many times where we are in fact worn down. And what is the psychological human relationship to being worn down? This fucking sucks. I'm tired of getting my ass kicked every day. And now when might you, but if that's what it is, if that's what we signed up for, if this is life, I suppose, and maybe life is on Ibiza and traveling the world, and I'll set that bucket aside. But if life does not afford you those amazing opportunities, but instead is a grind, there you go. Then at least if you're going to be worn down by the things you love to do. So people who love what they do aren't bothered by being worn down doing it. And are in fact, people who love what they do are worn down doing it. And it would be difficult for me to imagine a project that my heart wasn't in, because so often I'm not an industry expert, but I still want to participate. I still want to be able to have a quality business that is profit oriented, which is to say it doesn't lose, creates jobs, is an asset to the community. We have restaurants in both airports, Midway and O'Hare. O'Hare are airport concessions. They're like fascinating cities. You would be amazed if you learned how much goes on behind the scenes to just fly people in and out, pretty seamlessly. As a result of that, we were awarded a massive vending machine contract over COVID, probably one of the largest in the country. And I will tell you, I know as much about vending machines as I did about cannabis, as I did about table service. Again, that's not a great business model. But if you're picking up on the patterns here, my business model is not industry specific necessarily, or not isolated to specific industry. It's rather applying rote principles that have been learned throughout the years, time tested, which we've all done. And probably the most identifiable example is athletics. Without God-given talent, you worked hard doing all the little steps to put together that skill set in order to be a player at that level. Those sorts of commitments and understanding, whether you're setting a goal because you don't know where you're going, but you want to do it in a micro capacity, or you're reverse engineering. I know where I want to be, close my eyes. What was everything I had to do to get there? And if I'm nodding my head, like you should be, that's a lot of things that you would have to do. And skipping it or, cutting corners or cheating it, it's rare that I hear of an entrepreneurial example where the person was like, yeah, I have a full-time job. I work 55 hours a week. This is my side hustle. And it blew up. That's rare, right? I mean, I'm sure we can think of examples, but typically it's the thing that you focused on, you developed a team to focus on, and you checked all the boxes along the way. I think as far as emerging industries and what's ahead, what are the things I like to get into? Here is something you might, whether you're surprised by it or uninspired by it. I know my intellectual capacity background. I know what I'm good at. I talk about that a lot. I'm a single guy because I don't talk about that a lot, but it's because I like to do things that I'm good at, and I know I wouldn't be great at that. So right now, not to say I won't be, but right now I focus on things that I'm good at. And I think relationships are a great example because to have a successful relationship takes a lot. It takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of time. And I'm just not good at that because my patience, commitment, and time is focused on the things that I am good at. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. And I suppose time will tell. But there is the understanding that I'm not good at these emerging and tech-driven industries. Like I'm probably one of the few who has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. It's just something I understand it. I get blockchain, obviously, which I think is great. And we don't need to have that conversation, but
it's a whole nother podcast right there.
Right. And I wasn't trying to open it. But instead, what I mean to say is it's something that for those who are finding significant success in creating companies that are used as a service, whether it's B2B or B2C, they are committed to following those processes, understanding all the regulatory or lack thereof, I suppose, nuances, and being able to deliver. But I think for the future, I am, hopefully one day somebody's staying in a hotel that I develop. It's in that hospitality spectrum. I am a huge fan of Chicago, obviously. I owe the city everything. But I like other cities. Some are super competitive, and I think you have to be there. Another great lesson, I've gone to other cities arrogantly saying, man, I have a killer concept. I visited your community. Your community doesn't have what I'm offering. I'm going to sign A+ lease in a great location, the heart of downtown. I have gotten my ass kicked. I've lost so much money. I would be embarrassed to say the numbers out loud. But man, the lesson was there. I learned so much, and that lesson is in part, everything I did. Wait a minute, Carmen, you deviated from your message a little bit. Part of your philosophy was to so fundamentally ingrain yourself in the community. How could you do that in another state?
There. Now, let me interrupt you right there, Carmen, just for a
Right.
second, because this is so important for the Gen Zs listening. And first off, so many takeaways. If you don't launch your own podcast after this, I might be very upset at you because I could listen to you all day, man, and I'm sure the audience could. But one thing you touched on right there is you just talked about the amount of money you lost in other businesses. Cool. Everyone focuses on, okay, he has Joy District, you have Hubbard, you have these restaurants, you're doing amazing now. But a lot of people forget about that failure aspect and the pain that it goes through. And can you granulize that for us? How do you take those losses and then you still bounce back from?
First time you fail is, I don't care who you are, man. It sucks. For anybody in anything, go to a relationship. I've had my heart broke 3 times. You can count them. I've failed in business. I've not been picked in high school for a sports team. I've gotten an F on a test before. Do you remember that feeling if you really cared about it? You remember being hungry, but you're not eating? Do you remember tossing and turning? Do you remember staying up till 2 a.m. because you're restless and still waking up at 6 a.m. and it's still dark outside? And you're super fucking tired, but you're just that feeling, you can't escape that. And for anybody who says, no, I've never felt that before, you're the luckiest person in the world. But I'm willing to venture, and I know statistically that a lot of us have had that feeling, and it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't feel, it's never going to feel good. But while I can't necessarily, I go into it, I can't necessarily guarantee success. If I could, I would have my own podcast, anything I do. But what I can do is, in the event that it does fail, I have to be hyper conscious of why. The failure and loss of money, okay, I mean, that's an easy takeaway though, right? I mean, was it a failure? I guess. Did you lose money? Yes. Well, then I guess it was a failure. Okay, that's a little basic. I think the inverse of analyzing the successes from your failure. I failed because of these 3 reasons. I didn't put in the time. I deviated from my model. I wasn't as committed as it would take. I have a full-time job to have a successful startup. It's going to take 60 hours a week. I only put in 30. Okay. Now, is it a arithmetic solution? No, because it's difficult to it's difficult to apply 120 man hours in every week. But the strategy is different. Wait a minute, if it does take 120 hours, or excuse me, it does take 60 hours, and I already have 60 at my full-time job, and I'm not willing to quit, then I have to make up for the 60 hours. And maybe I'll do that through a partnership, collaboration. Maybe I'll have to fundraise to assess, okay, in those 60 hours, that's accomplishing these 20 tasks. I'm going to outsource 8 of these tasks. And it's going to cost me an X or Y variable delta in additional costs. And maybe I have to fundraise for that. Or maybe I go out less, get less bottle service, don't buy that jacket, whatever it is to get the, but the fundamental reality is that, are you willing to do what it takes? And if you aren't, okay, then let's analyze how better. And I got to learn that. Okay, the next market I go to, I need to understand what those failures are. So those feelings don't go away. I will say, for somebody who gets sued, maybe probably more often than the next person, for somebody who swims with sharks, bigger sharks than me, and being younger. It's so unfortunate. I promise I will never be like this, but people who are older and are titans in their industry, more often than not, don't like seeing the young bucks and buckets succeed, and that sucks, right? But hey, this is what we signed up for, And so, I will say I take it less personal. I don't get as worked up. I might only lose my lunch instead of lose my lunch and dinner. It begins to subside a little bit, and that's another asset to failures. I think it's just we've all stumbled or maybe failed. It's just, are we conscious of it? Are we conscious of the feelings that we're having? And the goal can't be, I never want to feel like this again necessarily. The goal should be, why did I fail? And I don't want to contribute to the steps that led to my failure in another circumstance. Okay. Because that can be avoided.
Yeah, I love that. And just again, you're talking about the conscientious aspect of it. Well, why am I feeling like this? What's going on? But the key is, I think you're extrapolating to is, how can I learn from this failure, right? Instead of focusing on the feeling, what can I do better next time? So, and I think if we look at a real world example, right? So you employ, is it over 1,000 people now? I don't want to be incorrect.
Yeah. So, I mean, at a certain point, we are in we're in the COVID era. So industries, companies, and jobs are not what they were pre-COVID. But yeah, hundreds. Yeah, sure. I mean, different industries, hundreds of people.
So sure. So let's look at that. So you're a leader, you run these businesses. Again, it's beautiful from the outside factor to look and be like, wow, this is amazing what he's doing. But COVID-19 hits, people are losing jobs. We don't know what the heck is next. The government saying this, you have to send people home, unemployment, everything during COVID was so ambiguous. So as a leader where you're running these companies and now COVID hits, what did you do? How did you react? That's where leaders are truly tested, right?
Yeah, it was, history will teach COVID with so many different lenses and perspectives. And there were some industries that flourished during COVID. And there were some that obviously were devastated. Hospitality is described as one of the industries that are devastated. I talk about being politically active, but what I don't mean to say is being political. I don't get political. It's like the only subject that I don't like to talk about. You ask me anything as personal as you can imagine. But politics, we're living in a time of such vitriol and people getting so distracted and overcome with emotional intensity. And I bring that up because, we, in hospitality, we didn't have a ton of choices. I mean, it was a government mandated shutdown. I couldn't revolt. I couldn't pour tea in the Boston waters. Instead, I mean, I'll tell you that the different scenarios that went through my head. COVID happens. The mandate is March 15th of 2020. Within a week, I'm in the hospital with COVID. And I had it pretty bad. And I had all the worst aspects of the symptoms that they described. But hey, spoiler alert, I survived. And because I had it early, I wasn't living, I had the antibodies, and I wasn't living as secluded because I wasn't as nervous about getting it again so soon. So I had a lot of time to focus on work, and I attempted to enter myself into the other industries that were flourishing during COVID so as to just survive. Probably the month of May 2020, maybe April, there were a few weeks that were 911. Like, I don't know what's going to happen here. Because, I mean, here's, and it's easy to see, it's not just your employees, it's your business. It's not just your business, it's your lease. You don't just own the business lease, you may own the building. So, I mean, I would be foreclosed on every level. It's not one domino just starts spreading. Now, again, moment in time, I was able to shrink life down dramatically and immediately. My heart goes to those who had to not only safeguard themselves, but safeguard their families and their children, and they're supporting their parents and their whatever that those circumstances are. I was able to shrink life pretty much down to one person. The thoughts were always a bit of a moving target. Like, there will be an end to this, and we want to be prepared. So we would run models of when we thought the world would be reopened and how we would safely be able to communicate that people can participate in business activities safely. And those are all just pivots. I mean, sometimes you're just dealt the cards, and when it comes to COVID, I do think we saw dramatic changes in hospitality, like eating outside. But the overall industry wasn't changed in a revolutionary capacity. There's still steps of service. There's still a hot meal and a cold pint. There's still specific genres and concepts and food offerings. We saw other industries that were changed pretty dramatically in how we live our lives day by day. And so much of that had to do with tech. And so I think tech is probably my weakest suit personally. And the troubling thing is it's the biggest thing out there. So, I'm more reactionary to tech than I am forward thinking and developing our own. And by reactionary, I mean to say people are using apps to order food now. And we never offer that. We invite you to eat with us, not in your apartment. Social media, I mean, my goodness, traditional print and advertising in sports stadiums, and maybe not as significant as the social media platforms. So in that situation, I'm more reacting to the ever-growing impact that technology and social media and connectivity has. And I'm not looking at being a revolutionary by developing a product, but COVID shook everyone's life. And I think it's important to, understand that if all of us in 2019 were to say, hey, there's going to be a global pandemic and it's going to shut down a ton of industries, I don't think anybody would be like, I agree with that. I bet you that's going to happen next year too. The fact that it did happen, the takeaway is it can happen again. Maybe not a pandemic, and I'm not suggesting an attack by Godzilla, but I am saying, industries can get upended. And for most Gen Z and millennials, we didn't live through the 2008 crash. We didn't live through the 9/11 recession and its impacts on air travel as professionals. I mean, we certainly were alive, but we weren't professionally managing those situations. So COVID was likely our first professional upend. And it is, for me, it's important to now in the back of my head, I kind of have safety measures and stopgaps in the event that we have to shut down. I didn't have that pre-COVID. So that was a long way to a short answer, but.
No, that was a phenomenal answer. I think the biggest takeaway I take from that is the fact that you took a pretty dire situation that, quite frankly, from the president to anyone, it was hard to know what to do and how to navigate. And now you instilled those principles going forward of how to hedge yourself, so to speak, protect yourself. On that concept, of course, Gen Z's, the podcast was launched during COVID, The More We Know, because I was fortunate to have mentors in my life growing up from a very privileged background that I don't shy away from at all. But a lot of people don't have that same fortune of mentors and guiding. And, it seems like in the businesses you launched, you didn't necessarily have mentors. Your parents were not entrepreneurs. You had to navigate those waters, so to speak, on your own. But for the Gen Zs listening or watching this, whatever platform they're watching or listening on, to have the multitude of businesses that you have, what do you tell them about going forward to start, whether that's a business or whether that's a movement, whatever they want to do? What's your best advice to Gen Zs about going forward?
I love this question. I don't pretend to have the right answer, but I can probably paint a picture that we've all experienced. And for me, it's the hungover Sunday or Monday. I mean, for me, it could be any day. And that terrible feeling where you don't really care what emails you're getting. You don't want to talk to anybody. Your head is pounding. You just want to eat, go to sleep, watch Netflix. Those are dangerous days, dangerous habits. Now, I'm saying that literally did that myself a few days ago. So this isn't me pointing the fingers. But is the takeaway, okay, well then don't go out and drink. You want to be a man at night, you got to be a man in the morning. Know your limits. Sure. Oh, okay. Or instead, for me, it's not about placing caps on life's journeys and experiences. Instead, I like to look at every day as a test. So there's only going to be one November 24th, 2021. We will never have another Wednesday, November 24th, 2021, ever again. And if that means something to you, in which it should, a day should mean something to you, time should mean something to you, then I want to be able to maximize my November, I already forgot, 24th, 2021. And with that, yes, as a mentor, I understand the fundamental principles of and power between the mentor and mentee. It just wasn't for me. And I probably have a little bit more of an arrogant personality, but I like to replace arrogance with confidence. So I was confident that I could learn the process. Now, what does learn the process mean? Okay, and how can I maximize November 24th, 2021? Well, here's what you can do for anybody who's listening. You do have people in your network. As a matter of fact, you can find me on Instagram. My name is Carmen Rossi, Rossi. You can email me, carmen@8hospitality.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on all the damn stuff. I respond to DMs, and you know where I live, in Chicago. Okay, well, I'm inviting you to reach out, and I'm happy to schedule a call or have a coffee. Now, am I going to hear your pitch? Am I going to give you an hour? I don't know. I mean, that's not, but there's a ton of people like me in your lives where I'm not taking away from whether you're under the weather, whether you're tired, whether you just ran a marathon or hungover, whatever the thing is. I'm not taking away that the day isn't exhausting. I'm just suggesting that every day is a test, and you need to get a good grade on that test. And is it okay every once in a while to fuck up a quiz? Sure, but your overall grade will be impacted. And the more bad marks you have, we all know you can expect an outcome that really wasn't your goal. And it's probably disappointing because that's not your brand. You're not somebody who underperforms. And just on an academic basis, that lesson was learned in my frustration of getting a grade at the end of the semester of a class that I couldn't ever take again. And I pissed the shit out of me, and I had no recourse. Am I going to take the class over again? I mean, nobody does that. But more importantly, it was like, well, Carmen. I mean, there was that week after spring break where you continued to be on spring break and you kind of screwed all that up. The same thing can go with, I don't have a job yet, or I don't like my current job, or I don't even know what's out there. Like, I know I'm not happy here, but I can't really tell you what I'm in. Okay, well, go talk to people. Listen to podcasts. Talk to people. Write down your questions. Fish them out later. Like I said, I don't like putting caps on life experiences because I so often don't know where I'm going next. And then you just happen to get there. And it was because I went out, I took a call, I scheduled a meeting, I picked somebody's brains, I pushed myself to learn. And in doing that, that opened up another door, that opened up another door. And maybe it's 2 years later, 3 years later, I can absolutely identify companies I own today that I'm in industries I don't know. Parking, I never intended to have a parking company. But I partnered with somebody who I'd met years ago and had nothing to do, no business relationship. And when I won this big parking contract, I knew who to go to, or I knew who could help. And so, it's actually it's exciting to continue to push yourself. I appreciate that I don't set 3 and 5 and 10-year goals. Never have. I'll be honest with you. I really don't even set 1-year goals. I do look at it as a grade. I would be disappointed if 2018 was a worse year than 2017 in theory. And so, the exciting part is you can work in the micro on maximizing every day. And again, while on the one hand, I think this is a bit of a monotonous point at this juncture, but yes, a series of bad marks probably will contribute to an overall bad grade, but a series of good marks and a number of W's lined up on the calendar. And, short of just being unlucky and needing to try again, you're going to put yourself in a much better position. So hopefully
that's very helpful. And one takeaway, the fact that, you extended an invite where people can DM you, email you. I mean, Carmen's very humble. He's not going to say it, but I tell him offline, he's the Dave Grutman equivalent of Chicago. And so to have someone of this caliber, I think you talk about profitability, the social capital aspect of giving back to the city, giving back to society, I think is what's the most remarkable, because you could talk about having 1 million, 10 million, 100 million. You see now in this tech unicorn bubble, billions of dollars of valuations rapidly, more than ever. But the social capital aspect, we sometimes forget. So definitely appreciate that for the audience. I know we're getting in the closing remarks here. I do want to appreciate your time. But one question, I posted yesterday that we were going to do this episode, and I opened it up to the audience to let me know what they want to hear from you or questions. And of course, you had everything about, I want to know more about Joy District. How do I get into Joy District? How do I do this? How do I do that? But I think the one question that I got that I thought was impactful was, Carmen, if I took away Joy District, Hubbard Inn, I took away all your businesses, you had to start from square one again, zero today, Carmen Rossi today. What are you doing?
That's an awesome question. And I'll tell you, I think about that a lot. Because I made this comment. I want to be accurate. I made this comment on Monday, which is to say, I made this comment 2 days ago. And it was just kind of a sobering moment where I'm like, the scary part with the way society is today and the way all these articles you read is, it's so difficult to have a long track record. People are riding high, and then the business was great, and then the industry shifted, the product collapsed, they took their eye off the ball. Or just quite frankly, it's hard to be relevant and successful for months, years, decades. And that's got to be a message that, when I say it's a little bit more sobering, that's our community, right? That's, if we're talking about millennials and Gen Zs today, we have decades ahead of us. So we have to continue. We not only have to climb Mount Everest, but we have to just keep climbing and do so until the end of time. And that is that's nerving. But to your question, so I lose everything. which I wouldn't be the first. We see it happen to people. What would I do? I'd have to do something pretty quick and dramatic. You're asking a specific question about me, and I think there's at least a psychological analysis that, how I would react to it. It would be difficult, just answering your question as a human being, to start small and all over again. I've seen too much. It'd be hard to, I don't mean to go back. It'd just be hard to watch it all disappear and have to start all over again. Now, so there's no preparation for demise unless it's concepts of savings and humility. But the real question that I become moderately obsessed with is, could I do it all over again? Could I, and if the answer is no, well, that's a totally different those are dark thoughts. But if the answer is yes, and if you believe that, and here's my cherry point. If you believe that the principles you apply, that I have described almost ad nauseum at this point, that we're applying the same sort of principles and strengthening our skills so that it becomes it almost becomes automatic, right? Because we've done it so many times, we just automatically know we've trained ourselves to follow the steps and see through. So then the hurdle is your reputation, right? If I knew I could apply those principles, just like I have for seemingly my entire life, and then I should be able to accept that I could do it all over again. But the cherry principle to that is whether the market, whether society would let me. And we've also seen examples of society, I won't even say the C word, but, effectively cutting someone out or not letting them back in. And that has to do with brand and reputation. So I can tell you from an early age, I was always dealing with people who were older and more likely who were more successful. And I'm thinking of a few people right now that are wonderfully charming, hilarious, witty, great times to hang around with, very cool, just like an enjoyable person. And then even better, they were willing to help and they were willing to share, and then they teach me things. I learn things every day, every single day, every day. But then I saw them screw somebody over. I've seen it. I saw them be too cutthroat and deliberately hurt someone. And no matter those 7 wonderful things that I characterize them with, I can't see past that. So the lesson for me to learn was, man, I don't ever want to be like that. I don't ever want to give anybody the opportunity to say, fuck Carmen. Like, yeah, he's a fun time, and all those things. But that one is a tough one, is when you deliberately set out to hurt somebody. I'm not saying you have to help everybody. But when you screw somebody over and you act in bad faith, that is not cool. And that's hard to overcome. And that I think is, that to me, I can explain to you the steps and how I look at it, but that to me is the most important takeaway. I certainly don't hope that everything gets taken away, and I certainly don't run through the exercise of starting all over again, but I'm confident I could. I've done it, and I have those. But what I can't control necessarily is if the market will let me. I can control, unless I screw it up, then it's going to be difficult to change everybody's minds. And that's what I don't want to lose.
That was so beautifully said. I mean, you basically are talking about product market fit, right? I mean, look at even a company like QB, $2 billion valuation. They had executives from Disney. and all of a sudden the company goes bankrupt, and you scratch your head and say, wait, they had everything, the venture capitalists, the top firms, they had Disney executives, the story's there. Why'd you fail? Well, the, the customers told you, we'd rather be on TikTok for free than pay you $7.99 a month for these short skits. So I think you just hit the nail on the head with product market fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, to the audience, I think we have exciting times ahead of us. I think we have personalities that are compassionate. I think while we are competitive, we embrace community. We like team building. We like team wins, right? And so, we'll be working together for the rest of our lives, pretty much. And I hope that we continue to maintain and establish those. I mean, you see what I've done in 10 years. So even if you're listening to this and you're 40, it's a long time. And the good news is you don't have to have a 10-year plan. You can just start without knowing necessarily where you want to end up. You could just start applying very, very consistent disciplines and work your way to getting there.
Definitely. I mean, that is Carmen Rossi, who just provided us so many gems in this last hour. I mean, to have you as our mentor today is inspiring, and to see what you've accomplished in the decade, I think it's only exciting to see what you're going to do the next decade. You've given us so much this past hour. Allow the audience to give back in the sense that, can you share with us anything that you do have going on, or where they can go support your businesses or companies?
Well, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a lot more announcements coming up. There's a few things I really don't like about myself, and one of them is I am incredibly moderately pessimistic, but I am a bit of I don't like jinxing myself, and I need a few things to happen on a few projects in order to get where I want to be. So I don't want to jinx it necessarily, although I understand you are being sincere and allowing me the opportunity to sort of plug my own businesses here. But, our hospitality concepts are very different, but our models are the same. And we really want people to have great memories in our places. I know there's a lot of places that have they're better at cooking than us. I know places that had spent more money on the build out, and I'm not looking to compete with everybody. I really look at everyone who walks through our doors as somebody who is trying to have a memory, whether it's a first time networking business coffee, or whether it's a anniversary dinner, whether it's celebrating with family visiting, or a birthday, or a college friend, whatever the hell the thing is. We really, really want you to go away with a positive experience, because we're all about the repeat action. Those same sort of principles are applied into everything that we do. And I swear it's difficult to take this point as a sincere one, but it truly is a central tenet of what I seek to get out of all of this. And it's not the money. The money is just a really cool
Side effects.
Yeah, it's like, all right, well, this is kind of cool. Which is to say that not money is not better than money. So, or at least that's a thesis. But the contribution, the job creation, the efficiencies to market, the improvements to community. Maybe it's a building that raises now, because that building is performing, raises the property value of the building next door, which affords it now the opportunity, given its higher valuation, to improve the landscape, which now improves the block, which now attracts bigger, better businesses, and diversifying. You are contributing so much on just having a clean sidewalk, and a friendly face, and a commitment to just participating in a positive fashion. Having a fundamental goal, having the only goal be profit is stressful because you either are or you aren't. But when you can imagine some other goals, and that is everything I just described, there are days where you're maybe not profitable, but you really landed something else. And by the way, I don't mean this to be my hope for this opportunity was not to give you a insight into an entrepreneur. I think these principles can be consistently applied into any arena of life and most differing industries. Instead, I mean, so many of us work in the community we live in, and we're a proud species. And so we want to be proud of where we live and proud of the work we do. And we're pretty conscious of that over here.
And Carmen, I think what's remarkable about you, and I've had a few conversations with you now, but sitting here and listening to you tell the story for this last hour was your composure. Wherever you're at in business, the way that you compose yourself. I had one DM that came in about our podcast, which was interesting. Someone from Chicago. Of course, I'm not going to say their name, but they recently lost their job and they lost savings in Shiba Inu, that crypto coin. Again, we're not here to talk about cryptocurrency, but the question that came out of that, which is, they lost it all, and finding a way to be humble and bounce back. I think this episode will really benefit them when they hear that ultimately, right? One of the biggest takeaways I took from you is you welcome failure. You're not afraid of it. You're not embarrassed or ashamed by it. And if you don't have experience in the field, you're not afraid to go tackle it on and start a business as shown by your history, right? Which I think you can give. And if someone wants to granularize that, say, okay, maybe I didn't go to a Target school, but I really want to go work at Goldman. Or maybe I don't know what the heck a business is, but I want to go start my own agency, or I want to go start a club. I think those takeaways that you gave us is such a masterclass, and it's priceless.
Well, thanks. I mean, I appreciate the kind words. This isn't difficult for me, which is to say I rarely, I've been audited in my classes before because I rarely will prepare detailed notes and outlines and directions, but it's done so deliberately because I want to see where the discussion and dialogue will take us. However, I know that we're going to apply consistent principles, and so long as I actually believe in what I'm saying, it's not hard for me to opine for hours. Which, as you've spent the last near hour and a half with me, you see this thing doesn't really stop, which can in and of itself be annoying, but it's just reinforced. I don't need to read from a script because it's all pretty much there. And for the people, listen, losing your job it goes back to that, what we talked about earlier. And like I said, it's hard to have a desire for bad news and a negative outcome. Nobody desires that necessarily, at least of themselves. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And you have to quickly get out of it. You have to quickly adjust. Not to say that there's some formulaic amount of time to dwell and to feel sad. Both very important too, developing skills. But so long as you are confident in yourself, then the worst case really should be that delta in time between today and when you're back to finding a productive use of your own time, self-described productive use. And that delta can be a day, a week, a month. That's on you. But you should know you can do that. It's just slowing everything down into the micro, attacking the hours, and maximizing November 24th, 2021 each day. So I think if you do that, you'll get back on your feet faster than you're worried about.
Yeah, that was so beautifully said. Thank you for spending the last hour and a half with us. Carmen, on social media will be posted all here, but just one more time, tell them your handle on Instagram.
Yeah, I think it's C_ROSSGO. So C Roscoe. It's like that second grade AOL name that you make and you're stuck with forever. And my email is Carmen at the number 8. So Carmen at 8 hospitality, you know how to spell it.com. And I'm sincere in reaching out. You'll get a response.
That is Carmen, CEO and founder of 8 Hospitality, a law firm, many other businesses, and we still got to spend an hour and a half with him here. So definitely reach out to him, let him know you came from the podcast, and go give him a follow, go check out the businesses, and we're looking forward to see your announcements coming up. Thank you, Carmen.
Yeah, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.